Well, hello and welcome to this video. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Matt Petrowski. I'm guessing you're here watching this video because you're interested in learning more about FileMaker. I'm here to teach you, and what we're going to be taking a look at today is working with popovers. So if you'll stick with me, we'll be on my desktop and learning FileMaker in just a few. All right, for today's video, what we're going to be taking a look at is all of the little intricacies that I know about popovers. We're going to be using our sample file that we've been following along with. In fact, if you're watching this video and you found this as a result of a search or some keyword that you were looking for on YouTube, if you're interested in these videos in series, then you can, of course, go to my channel icon. Click right down below, look for the channel icon. It's probably the ISO logo. That will take you to the YouTube channel, and while you're there, you will then be able to find all of the different series of videos that I've been shooting. We're currently in the design, and we're going to be heading into, I will be providing a scripting one coming up. In fact, let me give you this quick little promotion here. As I switch over to Safari here on my desktop, if you're interested in learning more about FileMaker, I create these free videos here on YouTube just because I enjoy teaching FileMaker. If you like this instruction style, you like to be able to see what I show online, you like to follow along with files, I highly encourage you to check out my website at FileMakerMagazine.com. Just released a new video as of the recording of this video about generating SVG barcodes, doing some really cool things within FileMaker. But enough about that. We're going to head into what we're talking about in this video, and if you'd like to follow along, down in the description of this video where there is a show more link, you'll be able to reveal the extra contents of the description, and there should be a link in order to find the file that we're going to be working with, which is this one right here. It's the file we've been working with all along in this series. So popovers. Let's talk about them. Now, one cool thing that I like here, you can see that as I hover over here, I talked about this in just a previous video, some really cool effects that you can do with buttons. In fact, it's not in this series. I think I did a separate video just talking about button tricks, and this was one of them. You can get this nice effect that when you hover over a button, it does this nice cool trick. So look for that on YouTube here as well. It doesn't work on mobile because mobile doesn't render the inner shadows for FileMaker Go, but it does work here. Now, I have redesigned or started to redesign this popover, and it gave me the idea, hey, I should probably talk about this. Now, everything below this portal, really, I haven't designed, I haven't touched it up. We've got to solve a problem in this database with regards to creating a new project. It goes all the way back to this particular area doesn't function when there is a 0 found count. So you always come across things in FileMaker that you have to address. But let's talk about the popover itself as I go into layout mode. And let me turn on my keys here. The keys will probably only show when we are, and I accidentally closed the file there, when we are in the full view of this particular database. Sorry about that accidental closing. Go back into layout mode and zoom in here. So a popover. A popover you have access to in two different ways. You can create the popover object itself. You're going to find that right here under the button tool, where if you hold and click and select, you have a standard popover button. But as I've stated in some previous videos, my typical go-to these days is to use a button bar. And a button bar, when you have that selected out, it also gives you the opportunity for any given segment, of which I have 1, 2, and 3 here, to be able to set that to a popover button, which we have right there. So those are the two ways that you can do this. When would you pick a standard popover over a button bar as a popover? Well, the distinction, the primary distinction between the two is that with a button bar, with a segment, let's see if I can select on this and make sure that I've got an item selected, a segment. The difference is right here. You can see that on a button bar, we simply have active inactive, hover, pressed, and focus. So the biggest thing is the active versus inactive. We are going to have to account for both of those. And typically what I do is on a button bar set to be a popover, I will just set those to be the same thing for the most part. Otherwise, if we take a look at our regular popover, just a standard button which acts as a popover, with that selected, you can see that we don't have the active versus inactive. We just have a normal state that we have right here. So you do have to account, if you're going to use that button bar instead of just the standard popover, the fact that you have an extra state if you do that button bar. But the popover itself has a number of unique things about it, and it's always good to know about these things. So with this popover selected right here, we can take a look at the heads-up display, or all the options that we have for the popover. What's selected currently is the button. We always want to be aware that when we're going to select something, if we have the popover, when you double click the button, the popover opens, and of course we can close it with the triangle here, but still what we have selected is the button, not the popover. So some users will get confused by this. If I right click on the button, well, it's not going to work when I have my zoom here. Well, if I right click now on my button and I choose, say for example, script triggers, you don't want to confuse a popover's script triggers with a button's script triggers. So right now, these script triggers, these are going to apply to this button specifically, not to the popover. So we want to make sure when we double click the popover button and reveal the popover that we select the popover. Note that I made my selection from here to intentionally select the popover, which for me sometimes is not selecting. So when I hold down the command key, or if I was to right click, I would be able to get my script triggers for the popover, not just for the button. So let's look at some of our settings that we have here in our heads-up display. So these apply to the button, the popover setup. That's because it's a little confusing. In this heads-up display, you have two things that you can select. You can select the button for the popover, or you can select the popover. Well, this heads-up displays items for both of them. With the button selected, this is what is controlling the icon and the text if we wanted to do that. So this right here isn't affecting this popover object, it's affecting the button. So key thing to note. This, however, everything underneath this again is the text for the button. We can see that appears when we type. That's probably obvious. But here is our alignment in terms of where the popover is going to show initially. Now, the key with a popover is the popover is going to attempt to show the popover relative to the window and what is available in terms of the space for the popover. So in other words, even though I select that I want the popover to be on top here, you can see that FileMaker easily determines that it does not have the available space to display this above the button because it would hit the edge, so it chooses an alternative orientation in order to place the popover. So it is instead going to this right here. Now, if you remember that, you can do some things in order to take advantage of popovers. What are some of those things? Well, we can take this button and we can put a button off screen and we can still target a popover. So in other words, I can select this popover, have it display over on the side so that it does display on the layout, meaning it would just reveal, and I can target this. Now I forget if you have to have part of the button actually on the layout or not. I have to double check this, but it is something that I've done where I have the button literally off the screen just so that I can use the popover in order to display contents. And what would that look like? Well, we have full visual control over the popover. We can make the popover itself completely transparent or just choose to color parts of that popover. Now, I've seen this done in a couple of different ways. I've also seen it where a button is down at the bottom of a layout down here. And currently when I'm designing this popover, in fact, let's do this. Let's go through that process. The way that we're going to target the popover is we have to give an object a name. So I'm going to select the popover. I'm going to show my inspector. I'm going to go to the first area of the inspector, the position tab, and I'm just going to give it a name. And I'm just going to call this one simply Popover. That's it. Normally when I'm going to deal with multiple objects, I extend that out and deal with whatever the Popover deals with. So in this case, this project's Popover, when I reveal this, if I select it, I didn't give it a name, but the name I would give this one would be something like this, popover.projects. Giving the name or the prefix of the object something specific to what's already familiar to us in FileMaker. Makes it a lot easier to manage my objects. So in that case, this popover that I was working with down at the bottom here, maybe it was something else, and it would be popover dot whatever. So I'll just call it whatever for right now. So with this, we need to know that the popover itself is going to size based on the settings that I have in the inspector. So in the inspector here, I need to make that so I can show it. The auto sizing right here for a popover applies just like it does on any other object that we put on the layout. So my initial size, if I drag this to be a size specific to what's going to accommodate whatever I want to have within it, can be auto-sized relative to the size of the layout. So if I click and anchor this popover to both edges, that means when it displays, it will take into account the size of the window and it will size that popover out. So don't forget your auto-sizing when it comes to using these popovers. And also know that because this is down at the bottom, the button itself, because it's down at the bottom, the popover is going to, again, attempt to display everything that it can in the whole of this area. So everything that is underneath the bottom area here is going to shift and be up into the rest of this layout. So let's see what that looks like. We will make this about half size of the layout, let's say. We've already given this object the name of popover, whatever. So we're going to copy that, and we are going to, this button, off screen, we're going to leave it there, and I'm going to add a button just very quickly on the layout, which you can do as well. Where's my button? There. Didn't see it. I'm going to drag out a button, and I'm just going to type in show. I'm going to select the single step option here for the button action, and I'm going to put go to object because I want to target that given popover object. So for my options here, I just paste in popover, whatever. So I'm using one button to go to the popover that belongs to another button where that button is off the screen. This is just some of the tricks that you can do with regards to your layout design. So when we go into browse mode, what we're going to expect when we click show is, and we need to anchor this button, we can see the button down here. See the button right there? Let's make sure it does not show. In order to do that, we need to select the button. And in this case, we want to turn off the anchoring to the left. We want to anchor it to the right. So it means that it's going to anchor now and always stay on this side of the screen when we're in browse mode, meaning it's effectively hidden. You can see that it's not down there. But we click show, and lo and behold, the popover shows up. Now again, that popover could be transparent. It can have a translucency, meaning I could see through it. We can actually give it a nice, we'll give it black, and we'll make it a percentage of black, and we'll turn off this little arrow and everything. We'll play with these things. But we can see that as we drag the layout, the popover is resizing as well because of that anchoring. So let's go over some of the other options that we have with our popovers in terms of the design. Here in the inspector, we're going to go to the design area. We'll take a look at what we have. We have multiple parts within the popover in terms of what is displayed. Now, the first thing that we have in the popover that we can use in terms of information is the title of the popover, which is accessible right here. Remember, we've got this applies to the button. This is the button label. Now we have the popover orientation, and now we have the label. The cool thing is because of this little widget right here, or the pen tool, pen button, we get to specify a calculation. So the title of a popover is often a good place to give a count if you have portals or whatever it is that you want to display based on the popover itself. Now I say that because let's take a look at this projects right here. Notice what I have is redundancy. I want you to always pay attention to the fact that when the title is there on the popover, you do not have to keep the title there, because if it creates redundancy and doesn't add value to your user interface, there's no point in keeping it. My button has the label of projects, and when I expose this popover, the popover now has the title of projects. That's redundant, and I get to choose now. Choose to either remove the label if you don't want to show anything and just use the popover for the functionality of display, or make sure that the label is going to be something specific. So for example, in this case, what I would modify this to, or will be modifying it to, is simply a count of the number of projects. So when I click on the projects button to reveal the popover opens up. I want to say 3 projects. Or I could say, just right off the bat, 3 active projects, which then implies, well, that may mean that I have more projects than just those are active, but I can take the opportunity to show the information that might be important to the user. So that is one of your tactics, is simply turning that off. Let's do it on the popover we're working with. Simple option right here. We just turn off the title bar and it goes away. So once we have turned off the title bar, we can now play with some of our options. Of course, we can leave the title bar on and still play with our options and see what we can do in terms of the effect. By default, a popover in particular, when we take a look at all of its settings, has 2 different options, or 2 different areas that you can style with regards to design. It has the content, and then it also has the popover itself. So there's 2 distinct areas. The one is the outer behind the content, and then you have the content in front of that. So we'll switch the content, and let's play with this one, and we can make it a little bit smaller. In fact, there's 2 options to control a border here. The first is this border is the result of the fact that we have some indenting between the content and the popover itself. There is no physical or no actual border on the popover itself. If there was, we would be able to see that. And these are each opportunities in order to design something that looks really cool. So let's make the content, which I think I have the content selected right there. Let's make it none. So we can see that the core popover itself is that gray, the brown color right there. So you can see that there is no line that's on. So the line that was being created was the padding, or the distance between the edges of the popover content and the popover itself. Those are all controlled right here in the advanced graphic. So for example, if I want to popover with a really heavy border, I can give it 8, 8, 8, and 8. And then I can go to my popover content. So now when I turn on any color for that content, let's say I go, you can see that I get some really thick borders. But that's different than if I select the popover and turn on the line. So let's turn on the line and make it solid now. And let's give it a value of 8. And you can see what I've done, and we'll use a nice bright yellow. I have multiple different levels that I can control what this popover is going to look like. The key thing that we need to recognize about the popover is that when we start to put things within the popover, what contains the items is the content area, not the popover itself. So let's take a look at what that means. We will drag something in here. I have this nice field or value of admin. So in FileMaker, there are a number of objects, and of those objects, I call them containment objects. They are portals. Each portal row contains objects, sliders, and tab panels. They will contain whatever you put within them, and popovers are, I believe, our last containment object. So there's 4 of them. We know that it's containment because when we drag an object into the container, we can see that as we drag, the object disappears. And if we let go, it would be outside of the boundaries right now, and it would become available. But if I extend this over that object, or in this case, under this object, is not yet within that object, I have to drag, drop, and then it's being contained. So I can see that, and you can see that right here, the division, even right there, I can see what happened to the text is the top of the D there made its appearance because the line of this object extended outside of the boundary of this particular popover. So this is a key thing to know, because when we have an object contained in FileMaker, you can lose objects in any object that allows you to contain things. So if I drag this up and drop, when I drop, FileMaker sees that the border of this object is outside of the boundary of the popover. But that doesn't mean that I can't do it. That's because this is a drag motion that I'm making right now. But if I extend one of the edges of this object, FileMaker is completely fine with that. This object is still, this text of admin is still contained within the popover. So you can do some tricks with this as well, knowing that this happens. And it really only happens when you resize the object, not when you drag the object. But a lot of the times, if you resize the popover, some designers will make this mistake. They'll have something down at the bottom of the popover, select the popover, oops, accidental drag right there, select the popover itself, and then drag up. Well, that object has now become lost. And a lot of the times users they don't know where to find this. You have to use a tool, oftentimes like, what was I showing the other day? I was showing that tool, FM Perception, in order to find out the boundaries of this object. And when you find the boundaries are, it's within this popover, that's when you find the object. And this really only happens on complex layouts, but it's absolutely something you need to know, that the potential exists in order to accidentally hide objects when you resize things such as popovers or other containment objects. So let's take a look at some of the other things that we can do with this popover. We can, for example, turn off our border on the popover itself. We'll set that to none. We will set the line to 0. This is just habit for me. Once you set the line to none, the object has no line. You don't have to set anything further, but I just like to make the line 0, and for grins, I make it to transparent. I don't know why I do that, but I'm basically setting all of the attributes to be nothing when only one of them has to be set. You can either set 0 or you can set none, and the line will go away. You can, if you set, we learned this in the previous video, if you set a transparent line, you can use that in order to buffer things out. Let's look at what that might look like. Scroll out here and move my inspector. So remember, with that line, if we had a solid line and it was 8 points, notice that it made a shift right there. We get a graphic effect where if the line normally would be turned on, we get this arrow that bumps out here. But if I wanted the tip of the popover to extend out from the button, this is a trick that you can use where, let's say I wanted it to be as crazy as 20 points away. Do that. You can push it 20 points away and then just make it transparent. And that's how you can control the distance of the little triangle from the button in order to make it get a little bit farther. And sometimes that works, because let's look at what we have up here when we go into browse mode and we look at our projects. When we click this, notice that I've got a couple of options. If I want this popover to blend with my user interface and the popover itself is the same color of an object that I need it to be away from, I could use that effect. I used a different effect, but I could have used the effect where I bump it, giving the line of the outer border of the popover to basically push out. Exactly what we just did, 20 pixels away, and then the arrow would still be pointing to the button, but it would be now within the list view area, the white area. But instead, I chose to just give it a white border, knowing the white will probably blend with the background. Oh, this is a subtle color, but knowing that I would be able to show the distinction of the arrow with the white border right there. So just a different option that you can take with the popover. So that's a pretty cool thing, knowing that I can push that out using the setting of the popover. So let's select the popover. We will turn the line to none. It'll shrink that triangle right there close, and I'll give that 0. So again, The inside portion, as I delete that one, this is really nice to know that by default, popovers, initially, if they have a corner radius on them, typically the corner radius, and we'll give this one someone that's really strong, is a corner radius. It doesn't matter what you choose, but here's the tip that you want to know. Choosing an odd value is better than choosing an even value, because if you think about it, going around the corner, how many points of the corner are there? Well, there's 1, 2, and then the corner itself would be 3. So an odd number makes for a better arc or a better curve around the corner than an even value, because it doesn't have to work as much to figure it out. Let's give it something really drastic like 13. So how do you blend the inner portion, the content portion? Well, typically if you're going to, and I'll select the content right there, if you're going to want these to look like they match each other, you're going to have to take the distance that you've gone on the edge, and here I can see that I've used 8 as a padding distance between the inner content and the popover itself. You can, for the most part, just play with this, but if I want the corner radius to blend, I gave the outside corner radius 13. I'm just going to use a number that is smaller than that. So in this case, I'll go 9 and see how it works, in order to make that line look like it actually blends. And usually that's a little bit of playing in terms of what's going on. If it was only 1 point difference, then I wouldn't have gone from 13 down to 9. I would have gone from 13 to 11 if my distance was only 1 point or 2 points, in order to make that look good. But again, we now have the opportunity to choose to make the background of the popover transparent, or the inner portion of the popover transparent. So I'm going to make this the inner portion transparent, and then I'm going to use the outer portion, the popover itself, and I'm going to select to make it black. And then of course I can choose other color here, and when my palette comes up, I can make this a nice degree of opacity. So always remember that you have settings that you can use for opacity in order to control certain things. Now, what happens if I don't want the triangle to show? Well, that's simple. The triangle is coming from the outer part of the popover. Let's just flip that and use just the inner part and see what we get as an effect. So we will make this outer popover set to none. Let's go to the inner content. Let's make that a solid color, and let's change it to black. And then we will set it to our 50% and see what we get as an effect. So look at that. That's pretty cool. With a popover, I get to optionally have the triangle, whether I want it or not, or I can use just the inner portion in order to display something. So how could we use this? Well, let's just drag this all the way out, and then we'll drag it all the way up. And where did my popover go? Decided not to display. Something happened with my FileMaker. That's the one thing that's a little annoying about popovers. As soon as FileMaker doesn't have space, it will resize for you. In this case, I was probably better off just making this something that would fit within my area right here. Let's put my button a little bit right there. I'm going to make my button larger because it really doesn't matter how big the button is, but I can get this sort of, there we go, how I want it to match my user interface. All right, so what have we done now with a popover? We are now able to use this as an off-screen display for a message. If our script or anything else needed to show a message, we would be able to show, and that's because my button is my button off-screen. Something happened here where I need to be able to show that. The popover is still a little too small. There we go. This does take a little bit of finagling in order to get it just right, in order to get it to display what you want to display. But ultimately, you can get it to work such that, I don't know why it's not doing it right here. It may be because it's a list view. This works a lot better on form view. We're here on a list view. And because of list view, sometimes some FileMaker objects sort of get confused when they're trying to decide what part they display on. Of course, a popover should show over all of the parts. And I'm going to put it here at the body and get that right on the edge and see if I can get that to show. Well, there we go. So we achieved the effect that I wanted to do. Now the popover, of course, because it's A popover is only going to stay on screen as long as the popover is being interacted with. As soon as you click out of the popover, that dismissal happens. Plus, we can take advantage of all of the effects that come with a popover. So you can see right there with our show, what we're able to do is show a little on-screen message. We would be able to put things in here so that the user could interact and do all kinds of really cool things. So popovers are not just for on-screen, but I think I've given you a lot of information about what you can do with a popover in order to achieve a lot of really cool tricks. Being able to get rid of the triangle, being able to move the distance of the popover with regards to the triangle by setting a really thick line and making it transparent. Telling you about the fact that the popover is a containment object and you can contain whatever you want, a portal, what have you. You can blend edge to edge. You can... you've probably used popovers. Put whatever you want within them. And calling a popover, using targeting with a object name is another thing that I've shown you as well. And I think for 30 minutes on a popover, that's probably going to be a good wrap for this video. So I'm going to head to the comments for those that are watching this live. Let's see. We've got just a handful of people watching this one live. If you're watching this after the fact, you can always post your comments down below, your feedback. Give me the thumbs up if this is content that you like. And if you like more of this, you can get even more over at FileMakerMagazine.com. So let's switch over to the comments. Oh, today I think I forgot to make the comments display. Let me switch back really quickly to my desktop. I'll pop out the chat here and see if I can get this to show up really quickly. I'm going to need to do something off screen here, or try to do it off screen. Bear with me. There we go. And I need to hook this up to my chat. So we'll switch to the chat, and I will make this so that the chat shows up there. There we go. Sorry about not having that ready. Well, there we go. No questions for today's videos with regards to popovers. So that makes it a lot easier for me. All right, so let's switch over to the desktop and let's wrap this video up. If you have any questions about FileMaker, always feel free to send those to me at editor@FileMakerMagazine.com. You can also head over to the magazine and you can click on, I think, support, and you can post questions there as well. Those eventually get to me. I'm happy to talk about things. Can't answer all the questions, but of course, if your question makes for a great video, then I'll either turn it to a video at the magazine website or I can do it here on YouTube as well. Also, if you're interested in themes, you can check out FileMakerThemes.com. And if you're interested in the upcoming paid portion of the content that I'm going to be producing, we're going to be going through scripting and focusing on becoming a master scripter as part of this course. I'm going to be using this file, but I am having to make some money. Can't do all of my YouTube videos for free. Then please go to this link and click to sign up, and I will be notifying those who sign up about the paid portion of the course. Otherwise, keep enjoying the free content that's here on YouTube. And as I always say, which I'm going to say, it's going to be much luck to you. But before I do that, you can check out or subscribe here on YouTube. And of course, the next video that I shoot will be available here at maybe the next in series or just the next that I produce. But as always, much luck to you. And until next time, happy file making.